It's not safe.
Are you kidding me, lady? Please!
This is the Filmcast review of the new movie Sick. This movie is directed by John Hyams and written by Kevin Williamson and Caitlin Crabb. I'm going to read the plot summary from IMDb. Due to the pandemic, Parker and her best friend decide to quarantine at the family lake house alone, or so they think.
Oh.
So I think we actually did a Scream series on the Filmcast in the After Dark not too long ago. More good movies than bad ones in that series, I think. Overall, I'm looking forward to Scream 6. So it should be exciting. Big Kevin Williamson fans on here on this podcast. Devindra, I know you're a pretty big Kevin Williamson fan, and you lobbied to review this movie, which is streaming right now on Peacock. What did you think of Sick overall?
Yeah, so I talked about it before, and you know what? Upon thinking about it more, I really want to check this movie out initially because there were some rave reviews from festivals, and I do think maybe some of those are a little overblown because this is, I think, a really solid horror movie. It's a solid slasher movie. Especially, I think what I came down to is I really love the direction of this movie. I think John Hyams, who is known for doing some great action movies, people love his Universal Soldier movies, I believe. And
I've gotten a couple messages from people saying that you would love that Universal Soldier.
We need to check those out for sure.
Yeah.
But the actual kill sequences and the parts where killers are chasing the characters in this movie, I think are really well done, and the actual fighting between them, all really solid. So to me, this is a really nice lean and mean slasher movie. Maybe not a groundbreaking thing like Scream was. I have to say, I'm surprised that I appreciate the direction more than the script in this movie, because I come to Kevin Williamson projects, for something different to kind of change the genre or kind of play with it a little bit. And I didn't really feel that here. It feels like the beginning gives us an opening scene that is very Scream-like, and even in that beginning scene you're like, oh, did you just write in bad horror movie choices of characters hiding in a room right while they're being chased, and they literally have nothing to protect themselves with. They'll come back out to make sure the killer's not there anymore. A lot of dumb decisions. This movie is filled with dumb decisions, and I get that. And I can also sense what you didn't like about it, Jeff. But I do think among the field of slasher movies out there are certainly ones, a few have really dealt with the pandemic very well, so I kind of appreciate that too. But I think in spoilers I'll talk about my feelings around where this movie goes, because I think a lot of it is kind of messed up, I guess, maybe given where we are now with masking and where we are in the pandemic, which is still happening. So I enjoyed it. I think it's a solid thriller and a solid slasher, but I would have loved more, maybe a little more in the characters, more in the story or something. Yeah.
Jeff Kanata, your thoughts on Sick, the new movie streaming on Peacock?
Well, Dave, I guess you could say my thoughts on Sick are best summed up in the form of a limerick.
Hit us, Jeff.
I sure wish that I was immune to this film and its inopportune premise and plot. It proves that there's not a genre excuse for too soon.
Okay.
So there's not, you're immune to, sorry, that was nice rhymes, but what is your actual feeling on the movie?
Yeah. What do you actually think?
I couldn't untangle that.
This movie is about 120 minutes, or an hour and 20. 80 minutes.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah, I love a brisk movie. I love a brisk movie. However, about an hour into this movie, I thought it was a wholly unremarkable slasher movie. I kept waiting for the reason that this movie was made. I kept waiting for the idea that caused this movie to exist.
Right.
And when it finally arrived, it was a massive disappointment. I thought this movie was almost a complete waste of my time. Not a lot of time, which is nice. Not a lot of time. It just feels like a lark, and it's kind of, to me, it's insulting. And I will definitely talk about it more in spoilers. To untangle the limerick, as it were.
Yeah.
In comedy they say there's too soon, and maybe in horror there's too soon as well.
I see. Okay, gotcha.
It is inopportune means poorly timed.
Yeah,
and immune is a pun on the fact that people get sick. I will say this: it was wild to me. The movie starts with something that happens in a lot of movies across a lot of genres, but particularly in genre movies, in science fiction and horror. It starts with a title card that sets things up, and you'll have in the year 30,000, robots have taken over. That kind of thing happens at the beginning of movies, sets up the scene.
Yeah,
and in this movie, it's the year 2020.
March.
March
2020.
It outlines something that we have all lived through, but sounds like a science fiction premise. It sounds
wild what we lived through. It is totally wild.
Yeah. It is. It's amazing how recently that was, and how absolutely foreign it feels to read it in black and white text on a movie screen. You go, that's bizarre.
Talk to some people that never even happened,
That's even more bizarre. I thought this movie was it was sort of this banal kind of rote slasher thing that just didn't. I was like, there's nothing special about this for 2/3 of its runtime. It's like, okay, you're doing a slasher movie, but like, why are we even here? And then when it finally is revealed why we're here, it was just a massive letdown to me.
That could have been pushed up to like the halfway point, or maybe to like really cement like what is going on. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna come in probably in between you guys on this one. And I will say there's a bunch of things I liked about this movie.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me start with we've talked at length about how different movies have or have not tried to capture what the pandemic has been like. And of all the movies we've talked about in the last 2.5 years, this is the one that I feel comes closest.
It does it,
to capturing the kind of sense of paranoia and sort of uncertainty around what it was like in April of 2020. Now, I haven't seen some of those other movies that were shot during lockdown, but like, I feel like, oh wow, like the opening scene, that really is what it was like.
We were all in that grocery store.
Everyone was wearing masks. You'd be waiting in line, socially distanced. Someone would cough and you'd freak out. Like, that's what it was like. You'd wipe down your grocery because you had no idea it was airborne at the time. Like, no one knew anything about anything. And I do think there's something like inherently valuable about capturing that. Like, there's something about like, hey, there's something that art has the capability to put us into that time in a way that like nothing else, reading a news article or listening to a podcast doesn't, right? So like, I appreciated that. Second thing is, I don't think it's an unremarkable slasher film in terms of craft. I think there's like a lot of interesting stuff that's done in terms of the style of the movie. Several of the sequences are made to seem like one long continuous shot. You can tell they kind of edited in.
Is beautiful.
And that's very atypical for slasher films, because typically horror lives in the edit. Like,
this movie is constructed like an action movie, which I appreciate.
So like, in a horror film, to build tension, you cut back and forth between things. This is a movie that's like, hey, what if we didn't do that? And yet, I think is still able to create a lot of tension and excitement and suspense in these scenes. So I actually think from a craft perspective, there's like some really interesting stuff that I really appreciated about it. So about 40 to 60 minutes into this movie, I'm like, oh, this is actually like pretty good. I'm like digging this. Also, it has Gideon Adlon, who plays Parker. I think she was in Blockers, I want to say.
One of Pamela Adlon's kids. Yeah.
She was awesome in that movie. So I'm like, it's always great to see
Nepo Baby. Here we go.
It's
Nepo
always great to
movie.
see her in a movie. So I'm like, like an hour into this movie, I'm like mostly like digging this movie.
I'm shocked.
And then the ending happens and turned me all the way around on the movie to actually, I think the movie's actively bad for society.
Yeah. It's like, did you put a turd in my drink when I wasn't looking? That's kind of what I felt.
I was enjoying the movie, and then I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. And then like, and we'll talk more about it momentarily, but I'll just say that like the ending of this movie, the ending of this movie, in my opinion, is unforgivably bad. And really turned me around from like, oh, this is like a pretty cool one location slasher movie to like, what were they thinking? I think this is a terrible miscalculation.
And also something I didn't see discussed at all, like in reviews or writing about this movie, really. So it's like I felt kind of crazy just feeling this way about it. But yeah, we'll see.
Well, let's talk about it. Okay.
I just want to say, like, even the first 2/3, like comparing it to something like Bodies, it's like that movie's in a different league.
I will tell you, I will say the script of Bodies is much stronger than this movie.
Yeah,
but I think
literally every moment of tension in Bodies is superior.
Bodies is doing Scream, basically, is doing the sort of like reworking of the genre.
I don't agree with that, Jeff. I think like from a craft perspective, I think that like a lot of the like these like set pieces or action scenes are like really pretty creatively constructed in this movie, in my opinion. So I disagree with you completely.
I feel like I watched a different movie than you.
Yeah, no worries. It happens.
Yeah.
This is my Avatar: The Way of Water, except I also don't like this one.
I hear you describing it excitedly, and it sounds to me whatever you said.
I also this is not your genre too, Jeff, right? Like you don't watch these things for fun.
Dude, I loved Bodies.
Yeah,
but that is atypical. That is the Scream of slasher movies right now.
Well, that's what I want, dude. I want if I'm gonna watch one of these, I want it to be exceptional.
There's room for a hamburger.
Let's parse this a little bit. You keep saying it's the Scream of slasher movies. It's the Scream of slasher movies in the sense that, in my opinion, both Bodies, and Scream do a great job of like capturing this really crackling dialogue that these characters have, and like capturing the dynamics between them,
and sort of the youth sensibilities of the moment.
Sure. I don't think that Bodies is like there's some sequences where people are killed in the movie, but like I don't think they're like, I don't think back on them and we're like, oh, that was the best part of the movie. The best part of the movie was the interactions between the characters.
They assume you know the genre is what I'm talking about, like the sort of like meta reinterpretation of what a slasher movie can be. Good. I realize saying it's a Scream of it is confusing.
Yeah, let's just clarify what that means.
But that is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but in this movie, I think it's like there's actually solid genre filmmaking, like direction in this movie.
But if your criteria is the kills, which is a perfectly valid criteria.
Yeah.
I would say that I'm much more interested in the level of tension, which I think Bodies, Barbarian, like there's a handful of movies that do it so much better than this movie ever does that have come out recently.
For sure. But you named two of the best horror movies.
Well, why would I not compare this to the best?
Not everything has to be a steak, Jeff. Like sometimes you can have a cheeseburger. That's all. Like I think this is a think this is a very good cheeseburger. That's what I'm saying.
If I'm going to sit down for a meal and I'm going to choose
has to be steak. Gotta be steak.
I think, well,
Yeah. I
don't fault Jeff for having high standards. Let's put it that way. But anyway, let's talk about spoilers for this movie starting right now. We're getting into spoilers for Sick beginning now. So let's just talk about what the spoiler is, right? The big reveal at the end of the movie is that, and I have to say, there was a moment when I'm watching the movie and I'm like, okay, well, when they reveal who the killer is, it has to be someone who's somehow connected with these people.
And there's not enough characters. We're like, there's not enough characters.
There's not enough characters. So it's like, how are they going to make this work?
There's one cool moment where we see a killer die. And we're like, the killer is dead.
Yeah.
And we pull off the mask. And we can't even tell what the face is because it's so mangled. And I'm like, this movie has an opportunity to do something really cool right now. Because I've never seen that. I've never seen killer's face mangled beyond recognition. It doesn't matter who this is. And second killer. And I'm like, okay.
That was a cool moment. That was a cool moment.
This might be amazing.
I was like, haven't seen a movie where like halfway through, boom, the killer dies. Like it's like, whoa, what? What is going on now? Like anything could happen now.
Yeah.
Even though Scream did the two killer thing too.
Right.
Sort of.
100%.
But it wasn't in the same way, right?
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so but what you find out is basically that it's tied back to this Instagram photo they've been talking about the whole time, where the main
Naughty
character,
posts,
who's not taking COVID as seriously as the other people, she was asymptomatic. She infected someone else. That person died, and then that person's family wanted to get revenge on her.
And apparently infected her friend too, I guess, who was worried about it. Yeah.
And as we all know, any family that decides they want revenge is going to pick up a carving knife and chase you through a house.
I don't think it's a carving knife. I think it was like a survival, because
in America,
the
weapon of choice we know is a Bowie knife.
really doesn't feel like they thought through the plan very well.
Yeah.
But
and
here's
also,
the thing.
hey, you have a smart idea to put a mask with some chloroform on it. Maybe start there. Maybe that's plan one instead of having your husband and sons run through in a completely haphazard, ill-conceived. You had the forethought to chloroform the mask.
Well, Jeff, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the people who turn out to be the killers in the Scream movies are mentally unbalanced generally and not of their right mind.
Yeah.
And maybe they enjoy this is the thing that justifies every one of the Scream movies is they enjoy the killing with the knives.
I don't
feels good.
This is not a Scream movie.
Yeah.
And also the whole idea of this is we're supposed to go, oh, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I get why I get why a normal family would do this.
Driven mad?
Yes.
By their desire for revenge, they started making very illogical decisions about how they killed.
And there are so many other places where this movie could have actually brought in real world paranoia, because we were certainly not lacking in paranoia to sort of like build who these characters are, and it is kind of like half baked, right? And the thing that makes me feel actively bad, and I referenced this before too, is that the hero is the girl who got all her friends infected. Right. That is our protagonist, the person who didn't give a shit. And the people who are angry about somebody who died, which sucks, because of that girl, are the villains. And also they appear to be the ones taking COVID the most seriously, other than the friend. That is kind of what icked me quite a bit.
It's a send up of all the people that took it seriously.
Gotta wear your mask.
100%. I mean, here are some facts. Here's some facts. Okay. COVID is likely going to be the third leading cause of death in the United States in 2022.
After knife attacks in your cabin.
I believe it's after heart disease and cancer, but
also after gun attacks, like after being shot for kids.
So
America.
So hundreds of thousands of people died of COVID in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Less than died in 2021 and 2020, but still enough to be one of the leading causes of death.
3,000 to 4,000 people dying every week. Still happening.
Yeah. And
if you believe facts, Dave.
And U.S. life expectancy is at its lowest point since 1996. So basically, like after decades of progress, life expectancy actually went down several years. Doesn't feel like anyone's talking about that though. Let me just finish one thing. Movies come out during very specific social and political contexts.
Mm-hmm.
This movie's coming out right now at a very fraught time for people who want to, people who think COVID should still be taken seriously and people who don't. I don't think the full story of how our society thinks of COVID has even been finished being written yet, right? And it's possible, like decades from now, when we're looking back on this movie, we'll be like, "Oh, we were totally right to not take masking seriously, or that like to think masking people were freaks and weirdos." Because it's not a big deal at all. Or those people could be seen as oppression. I don't know yet. What I do know is that there is almost a need right now in mainstream media to pathologize people who take COVID seriously.
Downplay actually taking it seriously.
In the New York Times, there was a piece written called "The Last Holdouts." And it was like, these are the last people who are still taking COVID seriously. Aren't these people such weirdos? New Yorker published the same piece like literally days later that was like, these are the people who want us to mask forever. And
I was in New York several weeks ago. No masking.
Yeah, and it makes people who want to mask like seem like freaks and weirdos. Like that's kind of what a lot of our media is pointing towards these days. And in that context, I think a movie like this, which has the ending it does, which has the message it does, is damaging. Like it's actively damaging to public health, in my opinion.
I agree.
If this movie came out 5 years from now, maybe I'd feel differently.
The good news is, this movie's on Peacock. No one will see it.
but yeah,
my thing isn't that just of where we are now. Like I do think like pathologizing or making fun of like people who were taking actual precautions back then. Because I was there, we were all there. We all lived through this and like had to deal with family members who didn't want to take it seriously. Had to deal with people who just didn't want to wear masks. And I remember that. Like it certainly sucks that this is where society is now, and that even our presidential administration is apparently still trying to push this idea that we will just live through it. I guess we kind of have to. But what really annoyed me is that, I was one of those crazy people trying to do everything right, and I feel like a lot of people were. And this movie does posit like, oh, maybe that's a little much. I think the whole
correct. It makes people who are advocating for masks into like freaks, basically. I think this movie
scene with Jane Addams, who I love seeing Jane Addams in everything, but the whole like, I'm being chased by a killer, please put on your mask before you get into the car, right? Like that's in the trailer. At least that
was motivated because she wanted her to get the chloroform. Like that I was initially angry at that, but then I was like, oh well, at least she's a killer. And then my anger turned back around again when I found out that it's because like they're taking COVID too seriously.
For sure. That is the joke though, that anybody who asked you to put on a mask if you got into their car or if like you went to their house was maybe a little much, right? Like it felt like
it was unhinged.
There are viral videos. Countless viral videos of people freaking out in public because they've been asked to put on masks, right? Like people freaking out and attacking people because they're wearing masks. And I just think that a movie like this is irresponsible, and I hate it. So
and for what, right? For what? Because it's like a silly goof idea. It's playing in a sandbox of real charged, life and death stuff. And for what? Like it's just like, look how silly we are.
I think it was more like Kevin Williamson or maybe other, like somebody, you're in lockdown, you're stuck and you're coming up with like, what am I going to do? Like, well, what, maybe I should get some work done. And like people are taking these kernels of what's happening in reality and like just using them as story fodder without thinking of the consequences. I think that's potentially it.
I do think that there was a interesting good movie to be made around the paranoia that we all felt. And honestly, you want a good slasher movie that captures like paranoia really well? Bodies.
Oh, if only somebody had brought that up earlier as a comparison point.
Too bad no one of note on this podcast brought that up.
I also think that it's so lazy that I feel bad making it personal, but it does feel very lazy that he just made it into a slasher movie. Like it really does feel like
all he does. Yeah.
It does feel like Scream, the generic brand of Scream. Like it doesn't even have the identity that makes Scream so interesting, that, the Ghostface killer and so much of what makes Scream iconic, this movie just like doesn't even bother with. There could have been I agree with you, Dave, that there could have been a version of this idea that actually felt smart.
Yep.
And this movie is incredibly lazy.
This feels like a first pass script, basically.
Yeah.
Like, and then he did have writing help too, so I'm not sure how that worked out.
But I mean, I did think the opening scenes were actually pretty good. Like it was a weird time. There was a lot of paranoia. What's damaging? How can people infect each other? And we didn't know anything at the time. And I think that like figuring out a way to tap into that would be interesting, and arguably some people think that that's what he accomplished here. Like it's like, oh well, the killer is really the people who took it too seriously and the paranoia but it's like, but Devindra, as you pointed out, it's like there is weight to who is the hero and who is the villain in the story. And ultimately,
I think this movie does not deal with the actual fact is like she definitely infected her friend who was worried about catching COVID at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, she's positive.
She's positive
through the whole movie.
In the whole movie. So like to me, like that is a weird loose thread, and just like, okay, I don't quite know if you really knew what you want to say. Yeah.
Anyway, there were portions of the movie I liked, as I clarified. Like
I like when the characters are good, when the characters are smart. Yeah, not when they're dumb, because they also do very dumb horror movie things.
I don't know if you know this, but if you access a Wi-Fi, your router starts blinking differently.
Blink.
Yeah.
Every router I've ever seen is always blinking.
It's just be careful. Just be careful. It start blinking red, and that's how it's gonna. Yeah. Anyway, okay.
If somebody knocks at your door, pulls up in a strange car, be sure to step outside to look around.
Okay. That was a cool moment when he's like walks inside and he's not saying anything, and he's like, because he's on the phone. I enjoyed that. That was fun, but also
that
was a fun moment.
Who would step outside? I like the horror movies where they're at least like, okay, I'm not going to do the dumb horror movie thing, right? Like they could do. They didn't even need to step outside for that. But yeah.
Jeff, any other thoughts on the movie? It seems like you.
I
just hated it.
Yeah, I really hated it.
Right.
I really hated it.
Jeff, I do just want to say a big thank you to Jeff for watching this one and for watching Plane last week, and then also next week. I think this one's going to be a sacrifice for you too, Jeff. But I appreciate it.
We've become a horror movie podcast.
Yes. We should have kept the name The Slash Film.
The slasher.
The slash back in, baby.
Yeah, put the slash back in. But anyway, thanks for watching it, Jeff. Devindra, I think there's some interesting things about this.
This is a good discussion.
It's a take. Yeah. It's a take on what a pandemic horror movie could be, and it's one that's worth reflecting on, and in my opinion, repudiating.
I'm also glad we had this conversation because not many people are seeing this movie. I certainly have not seen much written about it other than the early festival reviews, and I don't think anybody has done this angle of like, oh, it's really fucked up. What this movie is actually saying. So heard it here first, folks.
We need to be the last stand. Okay. At the end of the day, though, despite everything we've just said, it's still really impressive that John Hyams made a movie.
Although I want to see his Universal Soldier movies now. So yeah.
Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.